Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the fourth video in my Django series. Congratulations if you've made it so far. So today we're going to talk about Django models. Now, remember, before we get started on this, I'm just going to explain the concept of object-oriented programming. If you're already a programmer, chances are you've already been working with object-oriented programming, but then again, this tutorial isn't exactly for you, so I'm going to explain it in very simple terms, as simple as I can for beginners. So, when coding up big projects, it's easier to use this concept, object-oriented programming, because the idea is instead of writing everything as sequences of programming instructions, it's easier to conceptualize everything as objects and to think of everything as objects and how they interact with each other. So in languages like Python, we treat everything as an object. And I mean by that I mean actually everything. So what can actually be an object? Anything you can think of. Maybe an animal or an object in real life. And for the purpose of our tutorial, we want to build a blog site. So a blog post would be a natural object in our project. Okay, so what exactly is an object? Well, um, an object is anything that has properties and also methods. Well, for properties, we can see our post example. So what properties should a blog post have? Well, it should have a title, it should have some text, it should have an author, a created date, and a published date. And these are exactly the properties we will build in our blog site. And as for a method can be thought as an action, something that can be done by the object, by the post, or what can be done with the post. So one method we will be adding to our post object will be the publish method. So we are able to make a post public into our blog site. Okay, so this is like the basic idea of an object. And now let's talk about, very briefly, let's talk about the Django model. The Django model is nothing more, nothing less than an object, but it's an object inside the Django framework. And it's this special kind of object that can be saved in a database. So just database you can think for now as just a collection of data. Is the place where we store information about our users, our blog posts, and everything. As I mentioned in the previous video, we will be using SQLite as our database. Okay, so I think this information will sink in better when you see some code examples. So let's get started to coding right away. Okay, the best practice in Django is to build a separate application. So we want to build a smaller application within our Django project just for our blog where we can keep our post model that we want to build. So for that, we are just going to use Django's command line tools like we did in the previous video to create the project. Okay, so always first things first, I'm going to move into the folder where I have everything. So going to cd desktop and then Django girls, which is the folder I have everything. Always don't forget to activate the virtual environment. So I'm going to do this right now. My VMV bin activate. Okay, now I am inside my virtual environment. So I can use the Django command line tools to create, as I said, my new blog app, which is like a small app inside the Django project. But first, let's open the project with Visual Studio Code to see what we already have there from our last video. Okay, so we already have this this root app my site, which has our settings file, our URLs, and everything we need to configure our project. Now, as I said, we are going to build a new app like this one, like my site. Okay, let's go back to the terminal again. I'm going to use this special command using manage.py. Make sure to type this in just as I am doing right here. Manage.py start app blog and hit enter. Okay, now if you check here, you see that I already have now this new folder blog where I have another like another skeleton of the Django app that was created automatically for me. And as you can see, there's this script models.py where I can keep all my models for this Django app. And this is exactly what we're going to do. We are going to define our post model right inside this models script. Okay, now let's get started with our oh, okay, before we continue with the model, um, always after creating a new Django app inside the project, we have to register it. What that means is that we have to tell the Django project that we have added a new app blog, and for that we have to go to the settings file, and here, as you can see, just go to installed apps. Make sure to go here. And here are all the other apps that Django creates by default, which are ready to use for you: the admin, the authentication, content types, sessions, and other stuff. And now we need to add our own um, blog app that we just added. So make sure to add this new line right here and type in blog.apps.blog config. Okay, add a comma at the end. So what this line here does is tell the Django project that we have a new app on this project, and it's called blog. Okay, so after we have done this, we can continue working with our model. So again, to work with our model, just go to the blog folder and in the models.py. Okay, here, even if you haven't worked with Python so far, I'm just going to explain really quickly what this import does. So when you're programming, you have a lot of code which is ready to use and it's saved in different modules. So you don't have to rewrite to as it is a common expression to reinvent the wheel. You can just use code which has been written before, which has a certain purpose, and you can just import that code into the script you are currently writing. So you can use ready to use stuff. That is the thing we are doing with this import statement here. We're just importing Django models so we can use them and we don't have to write them from the start again. We have to do two other imports here. So just type in from django.conf import settings. So we are making sure we are importing the project settings into our models. From django.utils import time zone. We need this special time zone module because we need to use DateTime objects for our blog post. Okay, so don't you're not supposed to know how everything works right at the start. As I mentioned in the beginning, the purpose of this tutorial series is just to get you started with web development. Don't worry if you don't understand everything, just try to get the gist. Okay, so now we are going to create the model, and the way we create the model is the way we define a class in Python. So we use the class keyword. I'm just using the keyword class. I'm going to name our model, which is going to be post with a capital P. This is the best practice to name the The class is in Python, starting with a capital letter. And inside here, a parenthesis, I'm going to write models.model. This means that I am extending from this model object, which is, so this is telling that post is a Django model and it needs to be saved into the database. Okay, I'm going to define the body of the class here. So inside, as I explained before, objects have properties. So we mentioned some properties we want for our post. So those properties are the author. I'm just going to name the author. The author, and we want to specify what kind of information this is. So since this is just some text information, but the author will be also a user of the blog site. So we are going to use this models.foreign key. If you're not familiar with databases, don't worry. This just makes this foreign key sets up a connection between this field author with another object which will be a user of this site. You don't have to worry about that right now. Just make sure to type everything like I am here. Settings.auth user model. So we are using Django's ready authentication. We don't have to create everything from scratch. Cascade. Okay, so this is the author field, the author property for our post. We also want a title for our post. So title equals models.char field. So what this means is that since our title is just going to be text, it will be a field of characters. That's what this char field means, and we're just setting a limit here for it to be a maximum of 200 characters. So we want our title to be 200 characters at max. Okay, now we want also the text of the blog post, which will be models.text field. Okay, so text field is like a character field, but it's unlimited, so you can have it the text field as long as you want. We also want the created date, so we can say models.datetime field default now. So what we are doing here is we are specifying a created date for our blog post, and it will take a default value, which will be the moment we create the blog post. So we are using this time zone module we imported, and it has a special function now which just gives the date and time at the moment it is executed. Okay, so this is the created date, but we also want a published date. So for that, I'm going to do models.datetime field again, blank is true and null equals true. Okay, sorry here. Okay, so we are not going to set a default value for the published date. We want to be able to set that as we want. We give these options so it can be blank and it can be null. So it can be nothing. It can have no value. Okay, so these are all the properties we want. Now, objects, so we have the properties for the objects. Now we need the actions or the methods. So one method, which is a natural method for a blog post, should be the publish method. So methods are like functions in Python, and to define functions, you have to use the keyword def. Okay, for define. Self. Okay, so the concept of self is a bit advanced if you haven't programmed before, but this self represents just one instance of a post. So only one instance of the post. Again, don't worry if you don't understand everything for now. So what we want to do in our publish method, we want to make sure that when we use this method publish, we set up the publish date, the property of the publish date we specified here. So self.publishDate should be set up to, again, time zone dot now. So what this does is when we execute this publish method, the publish date will be set up at the time zone dot now date and time. So at the date and time of the moment when this method is executed. Okay. We are also going to save this. So we make sure that we save the property of this instance of this post. And we also want this special method. Oh, thanks. So what this special method, this stir method here, which has two double underscores. In Python, these are called magic methods or dunder methods, dunder for double underscores. So this just creates a string representation for this, for an instance of a post. What that means is that we specify here how we want to identify this post as a string. So we want to identify this post as a string by its title. So we are just going to say return self.title. Okay? Just make sure to type everything like I did, and just make sure you understand the main idea of the blog post model we just created. Okay, after you create the model, as we mentioned before, a Django model is saved into a database table. So a database table is created to correspond to one Django model, and the database table will save one blog post into one row, and each row will have these columns which will be the author, the title, the text, the created date, and the published date. But to save everything into the database, we can use again the Django command line. It makes life much easier for us. After we have saved the model, we can go again to the terminal, and to save everything into a DB table, we just say Python manage.py make migrations blog to specify the name of the app where we want to make migrations. Okay, just click this one, and you'll see that Django now created the migrations for us, and you can see the migrations in the migrations folder. Okay, here it is. So what this actually does is this goes to the database and creates the table for us. So Django generated by itself the code it needs to create this DB table. So after we generate this code, we also have to execute it. So we have only created the code to create our DB, but we now have to execute it. So for that, just type in Python manage.py migrate blog. Okay, so everything seems to be in order. And now we have created our first table into the database. Okay, so again, let's recap what we did in this video, in this section. So we learned that we have to create a separate app to keep everything organized. So created the blog app using the Django command line tools. Inside the blog app, we need to create a model, which is just a special type of object in Django. And it means that everything will be saved into a database table. So the natural thing to do to make as a model is the blog post. And for the blog post, we created all the properties we need to have for the blog post, and also a publish method and a string representation method. After we created our model, we also created the database migration, and we executed it using again the Django command line tool. Okay, so that's it for this video. Make sure to also read the Django text tutorial from the Django Girls website. I'm putting the link below. Anything that you want to, if you want to know more about what we discussed, you can leave a comment in this video. If you found this helpful, then please make sure to leave a like, to share, and to subscribe to my channel. I will try to make new videos as soon as possible to continue with this tutorial series. Also, don't forget to check my Twitter and Instagram. Thank you guys again, and see you in the next one. Bye bye.